2 Samuel chapter 16. We'll be over there shortly. So good to be with you this morning. We have a good number out this morning, many visiting with us. We're so thankful for your presence. I know this is a week where many are about to be traveling, being with family, enjoying some good food, good company. A reminder of so many of the good things that God has blessed us with, being thankful for those things, and we look forward to all of the activities ahead. I'm going to be looking at two stories this morning, maybe some that are a little bit more unfamiliar to us perhaps, but ones that I think are worthy of our time this morning. The Bible is full of stories that reflect all sorts of themes, like love and grace and justice, God's wrath even. But what I'd like to focus on this morning is mercy. Mercy can be defined in several different ways, but one good definition that I'll give is compassion or forgiveness shown to someone not deserving of it. And it's that last part that really gets to the heart of what mercy is. The fact that we are living, that we are breathing, that we are here this morning is a show of God's mercy. We do not deserve it, and yet God has granted it. We are not deserving of God's mercy or His compassion or His love or His grace. We are deserving of wrath, of punishment, of death, of separation from God, but God has extended mercy nonetheless. The stories that we're going to be looking at this morning are going to be twofold. One, if I can put it in this way, appropriate mercy shown to one. And then, on the other hand, inappropriate mercy. And maybe some lessons that we can draw from the text there. You're there in 2 Samuel chapter 16, and this will be a little bit more reading perhaps than normal, and I'll try to, for sake of time, not overdo that, but just to forewarn you there. Here in 2 Samuel 16, the context is Absalom, who is David's son, has sought to take David's life, to usurp the throne, to take the throne for himself. And so David and his men, they are exiting the city, and we see what happens from there. So this is 2 Samuel 16, beginning in verse 5. Now when King David came to Bahurim, there was a man from the family of the house of Saul, whose name was Shimei, the son of Gera, coming from there. He came out, cursing continuously as he came, and he threw stones at David, and at all the servants of King David, and all the people, and all the mighty men were on his right hand and on his left. Also Shimei said thus when he cursed, come out, you bloodthirsty man, you rogue. The Lord has brought upon you all the blood of the house of Saul, in whose place you have reigned. And the Lord has delivered the kingdom into the hand of Absalom your son. So now you are caught in your own evil, because you are a bloodthirsty man. Then Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, said to the king, why should this dead dog curse my lord and king? Please let me go over and take off his head. But the king said, what have I to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah? So let him curse, because the Lord has said to him, curse David. Who then shall say, why have you done so? And David said to Abishai and all his servants, see how my son, who came from my own body, seeks my life. How much more now may this Benjamite? Let him alone and let him curse, for so the Lord has ordered him. So we see this man, Shimei, come out against David, and even down there in verse 13, he's on the hillside throwing stones, kicking up dust and so forth, causing a scene, causing rather a ruckus here. But David, at this point, says, let him alone. And just for you note takers, I'll just go ahead and forewarn you, all the text will be up there on the screen again, but just take note of that. Should have enough time to write that down if you need it. But continuing here, down in verse 15, of chapter 19. You go a couple chapters later in 2 Samuel. Long story short, Absalom is killed. David has retaken the throne, and David is deeply distraught and moved by the news of his son being killed by one of his top commanders, Joab. But as he retakes the throne, as he is in his distress, wouldn't you know it, the first one that comes before David is Shimei. Good old Shimei that we've already read about. He falls down before David. He begs for mercy on account of his past actions, and we see from there what takes place. So this is 19, about verse 15, going down to verse 18. This is when Shimei comes into the story. Verse 19, notice what he says. He said to the king, "Do not let my lord impute iniquity to me, or remember what wrong your servant did on the day that my lord the king left Jerusalem, that the king should take it to heart. For I, your servant," quite a switch, "know that I have sinned. Therefore here I am, the first to come today of all the house of Joseph to go down to meet my lord the king." And then again Abishai comes in and says, "Can we put him to death now? Can we kill him now?" And David has a similar response. "What have I to do with you and the sons of Zeruiah?" He goes on to say, "Shall any man be put to death today in Israel? For do I not know that today I am king over Israel?" Therefore the king said to Shimei, "You shall not die." And the king swore to him. So Shimei begs for his life, recognizing his sin, and David grants him mercy in this instance. Well, we fast forward in the life of David, and this is when David is on his deathbed in 1 Kings chapter 2, when his son Solomon is ready to take the reins of the kingdom. 1 Kings chapter 2, and David has a lot of things he wants to give Solomon, some unfinished business even. Verse 8 of 1 Kings 2, "And see, you have with you Shimei the son of Gera, a Benjamite from Bahurim, who cursed me with a malicious curse in the day when I went to Mahanaim. But he came down to meet me at the Jordan, and I swore to him by the Lord, saying, I will not put you to death with the sword." But notice verse 9. "Now therefore, do not hold him guiltless, for you are a wise man and know what you ought to do to him, but bring his gray hair down to the grave with blood." So now, at this point in David's life and in his kingship, he tells Solomon, okay, it's time. It's time for you to exact judgment on this man who cursed me all those years ago. And so it seems from everything we've read so far that David's mercy was only extended to Shimei so long as he lived, so long as he was on the throne. So it was mercy, but it was only for a short time. Well, we continue on in verse 36 of chapter 2 here. Shimei is given further mercy. "Then the king sent and called for Shimei, Solomon being on the throne at this time, and said to him, Build yourself a house in Jerusalem and dwell there, and do not go out from there anywhere. For it shall be on the day you go out and cross the brook Kidron. Know for certain that you shall surely die. Your blood shall be on your own head." And Shimei said to the king, "The saying is good. As my lord the king has said, so your servant will do." So Shimei dwelt in Jerusalem many days. Mercy a second time is shown to Shimei. He should have been killed, or David gave him the instruction to kill him, but Solomon said, "You will be killed if you break this command." That he gives him conditional mercy in this instance. Well, verse 39, "Now it happened at the end of 3 years that 2 slaves of Shimei ran away to Achish, the son of Maacah, king of Gath. And they told Shimei, saying, Look, your slaves are in Gath. So Shimei arose, saddled his donkey, and went to Achish at Gath to seek his slaves. And Shimei went and brought his slaves from Gath. And Solomon was told that Shimei had gone from Jerusalem to Gath and had come back. Then the king sent and called for Shimei and said to him, "Did I not make you swear by the Lord and warn you, saying, 'Know for certain that on the day you go out and travel anywhere, you shall surely die?' And you said to me, 'The word I have heard is good.' Why then have you not kept the oath of the Lord and the commandment that I gave you?" The king said moreover to Shimei, "You know, as your heart acknowledges, all the wickedness that you did to my father David. Therefore, the Lord will return your wickedness on your own head. But King Solomon shall be blessed, and the throne of David shall be established before the Lord forever." So the king commanded Benaiah the son of Jehoiada, and he went out and struck him down, and he died. Thus the kingdom was established in the hand of Solomon. So Solomon's father David had already shown this man great mercy, abundant mercy. And at this point in Solomon's reign, he continues to show this man mercy, telling him, "You can go so far as to build yourself your own house in Jerusalem. You stay there, your life will be spared." Shimei agrees to those terms, but then he breaks those terms, and he's given the death penalty, as Solomon had told him. Just as Solomon showed Shimei conditional mercy by not killing him, by even giving him a place to live, God has given us conditional mercy. I like to bring up the passage often, Matthew 7:21 through 23, "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' shall enter the kingdom of heaven." Shimei said a lot of things about, "I am your servant, I will serve you, I will do all that you ask of me," and yet when it came to it, at a certain point, he did not do those things. We cannot just pose our own ideas as those of the Lord's. Say, "Well, I'm a servant of God, but yet I'm going to go this other way, follow this other way." I think another thing that we should recognize is the enormity of God's love, of his compassion for us. We looked so much this morning already at what all went into God's mercy for us, that Christ has not only died for us, but in that death, we have been given a second chance at life. We deserve death, and yet we have been given the chance of life. It is also highly illogical to look at the agreement that we have made of saying, "I will serve Christ, I am your humble servant." It's highly illogical for us to say that, and then to run after every other thing under the sun, saying, "I have made this commitment to the king," and yet treat it in so many ways that are other than that, being tethered to the world, whether that be possessions or career or family, friends, social standing, so on and so forth. Solomon set the boundaries for Shimei. He said, and by the way, notice even the mercy that Solomon shows him. Not only spares his life, build your household. He's there for 3 years at the very least. He acquires slaves for himself. He has some prosperity, it would seem. He's living in the king's city in Jerusalem, the protection of the king. There's a lot going for Shimei that didn't have to be there. Shimei took his situation for granted. He got comfortable. He was there for 3 years, enjoying the blessings of the king. And yet, he treated that protection and that mercy in he had such a low estimation of that mercy. He went after, saddled his donkey, and went after those slaves that had gone away. One of the details, again, that the text gives us there in verse 39, he did have enough time to think about all of the blessings that had been given him. But it seems that after a certain amount of time transpired, after it went on, after he had accrued all of these blessings and protection, he tended to forget those things, and that's what cost him his life, as he acted on his own selfish desires. Doesn't some of this remind you of Deuteronomy chapter 8? Deuteronomy 8, I won't take the time to go and read this again. We've mentioned this a couple of times recently. But the Lord tells his people through Moses, when you've eaten the fruit of the land, when you've built good houses, when you've built up your flocks and your herds, your silver and your gold is multiplied, you have all these blessings, your tendency so far has been, I'm going to forget God instead of being thankful to God, giving him the glory, giving him the honor. So the Lord tells his people, be careful lest your heart be lifted up and you forget the Lord. This is exactly what would happen with Israel. They got comfortable, they got complacent. Shimei had a similar story. He got comfortable. He was complacent. He forgot the blessings that were given to him. He forgot the covenant that he had made with Solomon the king. Israel forgot the covenant that they had made with their king, with God. And it ended in death. One more point I'll make here on the story of Shimei is that the king, talking about the king, he is long-suffering. Just as Solomon's mercy was long-suffering, so long as we keep the deal of the agreement, as it were. But that mercy will run out. Not only if we go beyond the terms of the agreement, but even if God's mercy, talking about those that are standing and breathing today, those that are in complete rebellion against God, they too enjoy so many of the blessings that God gives in this life. Allowing the rain to fall on them, the sun to shine on them. They still enjoy much of God's mercy. But we notice over in 2 Peter chapter 3, a well-known passage to all of us here, I'm sure, Peter talks about much of what we're alluding to here, that he is long-suffering. In verse 9, the Lord is not slack concerning his promise, as some count slackness, but is long-suffering toward us, not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. So he is long-suffering because he doesn't want anyone to die, anyone to perish, anyone to fall to the curse of sin. But notice verse 10. The day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens will pass away with a great noise, and the elements will melt with fervent heat. Both the earth and the works that are in it will be burned up. Therefore, since all these things will be dissolved, what manner of persons ought you to be in holy conduct and godliness, looking for and hastening the coming of the day of the Lord, because of which the heavens will be dissolved, being on fire, and the elements will melt with fervent heat. Nevertheless, we, according to his promise, look for new heavens and a new earth in which righteousness dwells. So this world, it will come to an end. We don't know when. We don't know when that's going to take place. The point that Peter is making is not only should we expect this day will come, but he says hasten the day. Look forward to this day if you are in the right relationship with God. Act now while God's mercy is extended, while you have time. That's, I think, some of the lessons that we can take from Shimei. I want to pivot now and look at another story in the Old Testament, going over to the book of 1 Kings. This is, again, maybe another less familiar story, but I think so applicable for us today still. 1 Kings 20, and beginning in verse 1, Now Ben-Hadad, the king of Syria, gathered all his forces together. 32 kings were with him, with horses and chariots, and he went up and besieged Samaria and made war against it. Then he sent messengers into the city to Ahab, king of Israel, and said to him, Thus says Ben-Hadad, Your silver and your gold are mine, your loveliest wives and children are mine. And the king of Israel answered and said, My lord, O king, just as you say, I and all that I have are yours. Then the messengers came back and said, Thus speaks Ben-Hadad, saying, Indeed, I have sent to you, saying, You shall deliver to me your silver and your gold, your wives and your children, but I will send my servants to you tomorrow about this time, and they shall search your house and the houses of your servants, And it shall be that whatever is pleasant in your eyes, they will put in their hands and take it. These are some rather bold demands from the king of Syria. And Ahab, the king of Israel at this time, says, you go and you do that, at least to the first request that's made. So sure, whatever you want, you can take it. Ahab seems to be somewhat intimidated by this king of Syria. And after Ben-Hadad comes back with further demands, after saying, my servants are going to go into your palace and into the houses of your servants and just take whatever they want, Ahab at least has enough of a backbone to say, no, I don't think we're going to do that. Because you notice in verse 7 of chapter 20 here, the king of Israel called all the elders of the land and said, "Notice, please, and see how this man seeks trouble. For he sent to me for my wives, my children, my silver, and my gold, and I did not deny him." He admits that. Verse 8, and all the elders and all the people said to him, "Do not listen or consent." Therefore he said to the messengers of Ben-Hadad, "Tell my lord the king all that you sent for to your servant the first time, I will do. But this thing I cannot do." And the messengers departed and brought back word to him. So he refuses this second request. Notice then what Ben-Hadad sends back in verse 10. Ben-Hadad sent to him and said, "The gods do so to me and more also, if enough dust is left of Samaria for a handful for each of the people who follow me." So what's he saying there? I have enough soldiers in my army against your city. There isn't enough dust in all of Samaria for them to be able to have a handful of dust each. That's what I'm going to do to your city, he says. And Ahab, this is kind of a clever response, and it's maybe a phrase we would use or something like it. The king of Israel answered and said, "Tell him, let not the one who puts on his armor boast like the one who takes it off." He's essentially saying, don't count your chickens before they hatch. It's a lot easier when you're putting on your armor and you're going into battle to say all these bombastic things about victory. It's a lot more appropriate for the one taking off his armor after the battle is over, after you've won the victory, to say, yes, look at what I've done. So we move forward, and verse 12 tells us, when Ben-Hadad heard this message, as he and the kings were drinking at the command post, that he said to his servants, "Get ready," and they got ready to attack the city. The text goes on to tell us later that from that drinking he gets himself drunk along with the others, that he is taking part in this sort of premature victory feast, it would seem. Well, you go forward in the story here, and God does show mercy to Ahab. He sends, God does. God gives Ahab a great victory over Ben-Hadad and this great force who had come to wipe Samaria off the face of the earth. Deserved, by the way. We talk so much about wicked King Ahab. That would have been well-deserved. But God shows him mercy. In the midst of this battle, though, even though it was a great victory for Israel in this first part, Ben-Hadad manages to escape on horseback with some other horsemen. But Ahab is told in verse 22 of chapter 20, this prophet comes to the king of Israel, says to him, "Go strengthen yourself, take note, and see what you should do. For in the spring of the year, the king of Syria will come up against you." So Ben-Hadad is going to come back. He's going to come and try again this stunt and try to win the victory. And Ben-Hadad, you go forward in the text, comes up with this top-notch plan to win against Israel, because he says, he seeks counsel, and the ones that he seeks counsel from say, we just need to tweak some things. The gods of Israel, they are the gods of the mountains, of the hills. So if we battle them in the valleys, that is how we're going to get them. That's how we'll vanquish them. But God tells Ahab then, moving forward in the story, "I'm not going to let this people malign my name to say this is how we're going to have the victory. So God tells Ahab, you will have the victory once again. So the text tells us 100,000 foot soldiers within the Syrian army are struck down. 27,000 that are left are killed by this wall that falls on top of them. It's a great victory for Israel. But Ben-Hadad escapes again. This time, the text tells us to an inner chamber in the city. And so it's at this point that mercy is granted to Ben-Hadad, only it's from the hand of Ahab himself. So notice verse 31 with me of chapter 20. Then his servants said to him, look now, we have heard, and this is the servants of Ben-Hadad, look now, we have heard that the kings of the house of Israel are merciful kings. Please let us put sackcloth around our waists and ropes around our heads, and go out to the king of Israel. Perhaps he will spare your life. So they wore sackcloth around their waists and put ropes around their heads and came to the king of Israel and said, your servant Ben-Hadad says, please let me live. And he said, is he still alive? He is my brother. Verse 33, now the men were watching closely to see whether any sign of mercy would come from him, and they quickly grasped at this word and said, your brother Ben-Hadad. So he said, go bring him. Then Ben-Hadad came out to him, and he had him come up into the chariot. So Ben-Hadad said to him, the cities which my father took from your father, Omri, I will restore, and you may set up marketplaces for yourself in Damascus, as my father did in Samaria. Then Ahab said, I will send you away with this treaty. So he made a treaty with him and sent him away. God is the one who has given Ahab the victory twice at this point. And so he is the one that should be able to set the terms of the victory with the enemy. Ben-Hadad hears that the kings of Israel are merciful. He goes forward with this plan to sort of butter up Ahab and give him a big head, which seems to work. We are but your humble servants. Ahab goes on to call Ben-Hadad his brother, and they really latch on to that idea. And Ben-Hadad goes so far as to say, once he is brought up into the chariot, he says, I will reestablish the cities that we took from you, and you can even come into our cities, and you can set up marketplaces. You can rule over us, is sort of the language here. Ahab's head is no doubt swelling from pride at this point. He is so naive to accept this covenant between himself and the king of Syria. But notice how the Lord responds to what Ahab has just done. Down in verse 35. Now a certain man of the sons of the prophets said to his neighbor by the word of the Lord, strike me, please. And the man refused to strike him. If you were told to strike a prophet of the Lord, we might hesitate as well. Verse 36, then he said to him, because you have not obeyed the voice of the Lord, surely as soon as you depart from me, a lion shall kill you. And as soon as he left him, a lion found him and killed him. And he found another man and said, strike me, please. So the man struck him, inflicting a wound. Then the prophet departed and waited for the king by the road and disguised himself with a bandage over his eyes. Now as the king passed by, he cried out to the king and said, your servant went out into the midst of the battle, and there a man came over and brought a man to me and said, guard this man. If by any means he is missing, your life shall be for his life, or else you shall pay a talent of silver. While your servant was busy here and there, he was gone. Then the king of Israel said to him, so shall your judgment be. You yourself have decided it. This is what Ahab tells him. Verse 41, he hastened to take the bandage away from his eyes, the prophet does, and the king of Israel recognized him as one of the prophets. Then he said to him, thus says the Lord, because you have let slip out of your hand a man whom I appointed to utter destruction, therefore your life shall go for his life, and your people for his people. So the king of Israel went to his house sullen and displeased, and came to Samaria. One prophet says to another, strike me. And if this is the word of the Lord, you better do it. He doesn't. He's killed by a lion. He says to another, strike me, and he inflicts a wound so bad that he has to bandage up his eyes. The man who hit the prophet was spared. The one who spared the prophet was killed in this story. The lesson there, do what God says, no matter how radical, no matter how unmerciful it may seem to our eyes. The prophet gives Ahab this scenario. I have this prisoner. He was in my charge. I got busy. He left. What should I do? And Ahab says, well, you've just said what the penalty should be. It should be death. And in a turn of events, the prophet reveals his identity and says, this is exactly what's going to happen to you, because you have let the prisoner of the Lord go. Ben-Hadad was not Ahab's prisoner. He was the Lord's prisoner. And he was the Lord's prisoner, and it was the Lord who got to decide what to do with him. Do we ever compromise? Do we ever compromise with the Lord's enemies to show them inappropriate mercy? What if Moses had stopped at 9 plagues and moved back into the palace with Pharaoh? What would have happened? What if Joshua had told the people to stop marching around the city on the 7th day and just let Jericho, or tell Jericho it was all just a big misunderstanding? What if Elijah had apologized to the prophets of Baal for offending them on Mount Carmel? What if David had called off the conflict with Goliath and gone to share drinks with the one who blasphemed God? What if Nehemiah climbed down from the wall in Jerusalem every time Sanballat and Tobiah sent messengers to quote-unquote make peace? The wall would have never been completed. Imagine Jesus going off to dine with the devil after having been tempted in the wilderness 3 times and calling him a brother. Tolerance and acceptance of the world are not honorable before God. This is where I want to pair both of our stories together. We need to extend mercy where God says to show mercy, like Shimei. But when it comes to showing mercy towards the enemies of God, that is those whom God has said, you do not show inappropriate mercy to this person, we need to call out the error instead. We are in a battle against more than just flesh and blood. Compromise, surrender, peace treaties, as Ahab made with his enemy, these are not real options that we have. Not if we're going to be in the Lord's army. When truth is maligned, we have to stand up for it. We don't buddy up with those who oppose error. Deuteronomy 13, we don't have time to read all these passages, but Deuteronomy 13 talks about so much. Do not listen to, do not tolerate the prophet who leads the people away from the Lord. In fact, you put him to death, the text says. 2 John 9 through 11, those who do not abide in the doctrine of Christ do not have God. And John goes on to say, do not receive them into your house or even greet them. Otherwise, you share in their evil, their wicked works. Finally, in Titus chapter 1, 10 through 11, false teachers must be silenced. They must not be supported because they overthrow whole households. So yes, they are teaching something false, but they are infiltrating whole households. There's so much more at stake than what we give people like this credit for oftentimes. If it is within God's will to show mercy, do so. Do not withhold mercy from someone who God says, show mercy to this individual. But if someone reveals themselves to be a Ben-Hadad, don't say, well, they're just misunderstood, just give them another chance. Ben-Hadad had plenty of chances to show his true colors of who he was. And if someone shows their true colors after a certain amount of time, saying, this is who I am, by their actions, by their words, don't kid yourself. Don't try to put a guise on things. God has shown mercy to each of us. The sacrifice has been made on our account. The question is, yes, we ought to show mercy where mercy is due. But we ought not compromise where God has said, do not compromise. We need to be faithful to God in all ways. You may be here this morning, and Perhaps you have compromised in a matter of, in a number of ways, compromising to the world, compromising to what the world offers rather than what Christ has offered you. If you've not put on Christ in baptism, you can do that for the first time this morning, being loyal to Him. Or you can come back to the King of Grace and you can reestablish that relationship, one that has conditions, but they are full of blessing, they are full of promise. You can do that this morning. Won't you come as we stand and as we sing?